How dare you speak to me like that?
I can try that.
Sir, I'm just doing my job.
Low-class colored staff like you should never speak unless spoken to. That line? It wasn't whispered in the kitchen. It wasn't muttered under someone's breath. It was shouted clear, deliberate, and venomous across the chandelier-lit dining room of the Marcellus, one of Atlanta's most prestigious five-star restaurants. At that exact moment, time paused. The sound of jazz from the baby grand piano, cut. The clink of crystal wine glasses, gone. Even the sizzling from the open kitchen seemed to freeze. Everyone heard it. Everyone saw her. Janelle Carter, 25, black, beautiful. Eyes like fire, posture like steel. Her natural curls were tucked under a simple bun, her crisp white shirt slightly damp from hours of running plates. She was halfway through her third double shift of the week. And now, she was being publicly humiliated by Caleb Foster, one of America's most feared CEOs, worth $890 million, with a reputation as ruthless as his tailored Navy suits. This wasn't the first time Janelle had been talked down to. It wasn't even the first time that week. But this was different. This wasn't behind closed doors. This was a black woman being disrespected, dehumanized, and dismissed in front of a room full of people in gowns and tuxedos, none of whom said a word. Caleb sat back in his leather chair, smug, expecting silence, expecting her to apologize, expecting her to lower her head like every other invisible worker he'd steamrolled for years. But Janelle? She didn't flinch. She took one slow step forward, chin raised, eyes steady. And she said, "Sir, money doesn't buy dignity, and I wasn't raised to serve cowards." A single sentence. Not loud, not dramatic, but every word sliced through the air like glass. The maitre d' gasped. The head chef dropped a ladle. A young girl at a nearby table whispered, "Mommy, is she gonna get fired?" And the answer was yes. Of course, she was. Within 20 minutes, Janelle was handed her last paycheck and escorted out through the side door. But that wasn't the end. That was the beginning. Because someone had recorded everything. From the insult, to her response, to the stunned silence that followed. By sunrise, the video had 2.3 million views. By Monday, it was on CNN. And by Friday, Caleb Foster's empire, the one built on fear, silence, and arrogance, was beginning to crumble. But this isn't just about revenge. This isn't just about cancel culture or going viral. This is a black story. One about truth, about courage, about a woman who had nothing to lose and everything to say. So if you're the kind of person who believes in dignity, in justice, in calling out power when it crosses the line, you're gonna want to hear how this ends. Stick around. Because what Janelle did next flipped everything upside down. And if you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or told you didn't belong, this story, it's yours too. You've seen the clip. You've read the headlines. You might even know the quote by heart. "Sir, money doesn't buy dignity, and I wasn't raised to serve cowards." But what you didn't see, what the video didn't show, was everything that led up to that moment. This is where the story really begins. Because before the world knew her name, Janelle Carter was just another face behind an apron. A name tag. A tray full of someone else's dinner. Another young black woman trying to survive in a city that smiles at tourists but swallows its own. She lived on the west side of Atlanta, in a weathered two-story building that leaned just slightly to the left, like it had given up trying to stand tall. Her one-bedroom apartment smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old radiator heat. No air conditioning in the summer, no real insulation in the winter. But it was hers. She shared it with her little brother, Malik 15, funny, brilliant, and already tired of explaining himself to the world. He slept on the pull-out couch in the living room, his textbooks stacked high next to his PlayStation. Janelle slept on a second-hand mattress in a room barely wide enough to stretch her arms. They didn't have much, but they had a system. Janelle worked 3 jobs. A morning shift at the diner 2 blocks over. A few freelance gig shifts at a call center. And nights at the Marcellus, a 5-star restaurant known for its perfectly grilled sea bass, overpriced wine list, and clients with million-dollar egos. To her guests, Janelle was invisible until she made a mistake. To the kitchen, she was efficient but replaceable. To management, she was always smiling, which meant she was always fine. But the truth? She was tired. Not just tired in my feet kind of tired. Tired in my soul. The kind of tired that builds over years of holding your tongue, swallowing your pride, and smiling through insults disguised as jokes. Because being a black woman in America, especially one without a degree, without connections, without protection, meant carrying two full-time jobs. The one you clocked in for, and the one where you proved your worth every damn day. But Janelle didn't complain. She didn't have time to. When she wasn't working, she was tutoring Malik, cooking dinner on a hot plate, folding laundry on the floor, or falling asleep with her face in a textbook from the community college night class she couldn't always afford to attend. Her dream? To open her own cafe. Not some big franchise. Just a warm, sunny space where people felt seen. Where young girls with skin like hers could sip coffee, do homework, write poetry, and not feel out of place. She had a vision board taped on the inside of her closet door. Photos of cozy cafes, little chalkboard menus, and handwritten quotes. One in particular always stuck out. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. Janelle carried that quote everywhere in her phone, in her heart, and in the quiet way she refused to break, even when bending seemed easier. She was known at work as the one who could de-escalate any table. Rowdy groomsmen, give Janelle 10 minutes. Entitled wine snobs, let Janelle handle it. She had a calm about her, a grace that didn't come from training, but from having lived a life where you had to learn fast how to keep the peace. But that didn't mean she was soft. When the jokes turned racist, when the hands lingered too long near her waist, when the tone shifted from condescending to outright cruel, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't fight back the way people expected. She just gave you that look. A look that said, "You may see me as small, but I know who I am." And that scared people more than 100 angry words ever could. Because deep down, they knew what she knew. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it waits for the right moment, the right insult, the right man to say the wrong thing in front of the wrong woman. And when that moment came in the middle of the dining room, with every eye watching and every phone recording, Janelle didn't freeze. She showed the world exactly who she was. But to understand what came next, you need to understand the man who stood across from her. You need to understand Caleb Foster. Because power unchecked is dangerous. But power unchecked, in the hands of a man who thinks he owns the world, that's a whole other storm. Before he ever raised his voice in that restaurant. Before his name became a headline. Before he was the CEO who got put in his place. Caleb Foster was feared. Not respected. Not admired. Feared. In corporate America, Caleb was the kind of man you didn't make eye contact with in the elevator. You didn't speak to him unless spoken to. And if you worked under him, you double-checked your emails 3 times before hitting send. He wasn't born into money. He clawed his way up, or at least, that's how the legend goes. Grew up in a steel town outside Pittsburgh. Dad was a foreman. Mom worked nights at a textile mill. He said he never wanted to smell like sweat again after age 18. And he didn't. By 30, he was already a multi-millionaire. By 40, he was controlling media companies, tech startups, and luxury real estate across the East Coast. Everything he touched turned to profit, not because he was a genius, but because he was ruthless. Caleb didn't believe in second chances, or grace, or empathy. He believed in results. He believed in dominance, and he made sure every room he entered bent to that belief. His employees called him the Shark, not to his face, of course. He was the type who'd fire you for blinking too slow. There were stories of people being escorted out mid-presentation. Executives who didn't answer his call within 60 seconds were blacklisted. Entire departments had been wiped out because one intern stapled a report incorrectly. No one said no to Caleb Foster. Not clients. Not investors. Not even his peers. Because when Caleb showed up to a board meeting, it wasn't a conversation, it was a coronation. He didn't argue. He declared. He didn't negotiate. He demanded. And people listened. Why? Because he delivered. Under budget, ahead of schedule, and with margins Wall Street could only dream of. He made money rain like confetti, and everyone wanted to stand under it. But what they chose to ignore was the trail of broken people he left behind. Assistants who left in tears. Junior staffers with anxiety disorders. Talented women passed over for promotions. Black employees who quietly vanished from the org chart after Caleb's casual comments in meetings. He didn't scream racist slurs. He didn't need to. He'd call someone articulate with a smirk. Ask if a black applicant was a culture fit. Use phrases like too urban or not polished enough. All while smiling, all while staying just inside the legal line. He was a master of plausible deniability. And when people tried to speak out, NDAs, threats, lawsuits, because Caleb had lawyers on speed dial, crisis teams on retainer, and PR firms trained to make any scandal disappear by Monday morning. He thought he was untouchable. And in a way, he was. The media didn't touch him, he owned half the outlets. Industry watchdogs looked the other way, he funded their galas. And even when former employees whispered about the toxic culture at Foster Holdings, it never stuck. Because Caleb Foster wasn't just a man. He was a brand. The sharp suits, the signature scotch, the deep voice that could either close a billion-dollar deal or ruin your entire career in 3 words or less. He moved like gravity. Pulled people in. Crushed those who resisted. And the sad part? People admired him for it. They called him strong, uncompromising, a visionary. But what they were really praising was fear. Not leadership, not character, just fear. And when Caleb walked into the Marcellus that night, he brought that same energy with him. He expected perfection. He demanded silence. He saw every server, every host, every line cook as just another cog in the machine designed to serve him. So when Janelle brought the wrong wine, not even her fault, and had the audacity to look him in the eye, that wasn't just bad service in his mind. It was defiance. And Caleb Foster did not tolerate defiance. But what he didn't know, what he could never predict, was that Janelle Carter wasn't part of his machine. She wasn't afraid of losing a paycheck. She wasn't impressed by his watch or his wallet. She had seen real hardship, real injustice. And she had chosen in that moment to stop being silent. What came next shattered his illusion of control. Because when you build an empire on intimidation, all it takes is one voice, calm, clear, unshaken, to bring the whole thing down. Sometimes life doesn't whisper. It roars. And sometimes, fate doesn't knock, it kicks the damn door in. The night Janelle met Caleb Foster wasn't just chance. It was the culmination of 100 small decisions, 1,000 minor shifts, 1,000,000 invisible threads tightening around a single moment. But from the outside, it just looked like a fancy dinner. Caleb's media empire, Foster Holdings, had just acquired a rising digital branding agency based in Atlanta, a company known for edgy campaigns, millennial slang, and influencer-driven buzz. It was a strategic play to make Caleb look in touch. Because truth be told, his image was aging like unrefrigerated milk. So to celebrate the deal and to show his board that he could connect with the culture, Caleb threw a lavish welcome dinner. It had to be upscale but urban, trendy but still sophisticated. A place with 5-star service and enough diversity to look good on Instagram. That place? The Marcellus. Janelle had just picked up an extra weekend shift. Rent was due. Malik's laptop had crashed. She hadn't planned to work that night, but life didn't care about plans. She tied her apron, adjusted her hairnet, and slipped into the rhythm like she always did. The guest list was long. VCs, influencers, tech bros in designer sneakers. Caleb arrived last, naturally flanked by 2 assistants, and the kind of tension that filled a room before he even spoke. He didn't look at the host. He didn't say hello to the servers. He made a beeline to the corner booth and immediately began issuing orders. Janelle noticed him the second he walked in. Not because he was famous, but because the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. He wore power like cologne, thick, expensive, overwhelming. And Janelle, she just did her job. With grace. With patience. With that soft, practiced smile that said, "I'm here to help," even when the world wasn't helping her back. She took orders. Poured wine. Dodged snide comments from a VP who thought being drunk gave him permission to lean too close. She'd done it all before. But that night was different. One of Caleb's guests, a younger exec trying way too hard, requested a rare bottle of red wine. Not just rare, off-menu, vintage. And of course, it had to be delivered by someone who knows what they're doing. The kitchen was behind. The sommelier was on break. Janelle stepped in, as she always did, to smooth things over. She double-checked the order, confirmed the label, made sure the decanter was clean. But the moment she approached the table, Caleb was already annoyed. He didn't look up, didn't ask questions. He just waved a dismissive hand and muttered, "This is why I don't trust restaurants that try too hard to look inclusive." The words weren't meant for her, but they weren't whispered either. Then, as she poured the wine slow and steady, the bottle slipped slightly. A drop, just one, landed near Caleb's cuff. It didn't stain, it barely registered. But Caleb exploded. He leaned back, locked eyes with her, and said it. "Low-class colored staff like you should never speak unless spoken to." The room stopped breathing. Phones lifted. And Janelle? She didn't blink. Because this wasn't just about a wine spill. This was about every time someone talked down to her. Every interview she never got. Every man who thought respect was optional. And something in her snapped into place. She stood taller. Her voice calm. Her words measured. "Sir, money doesn't buy dignity, and I wasn't raised to serve cowards." It was the moment destiny had been circling. The moment that would go viral, that would spark debates, that would cost people power, and give others their voice back. But in that moment, it wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about a movement. It was just Janelle. A young black woman in an apron, refusing to shrink. And destiny? It didn't kick the door in. It gave her the mic. The moment it happened, nobody moved. You know those times when everything slows down, like you're underwater and the world's on mute? That was the dining room at the Marcellus. It was supposed to be just another elite dinner. Just another glass of wine. Just another table of high-powered men expecting high-end service. And Janelle Carter? She was just the server. At least, that's what they thought. But then came the insult. Caleb Foster's voice cut through the chatter like a chainsaw through silk. Loud, sharp, deliberate. Low-class colored staff like you should never speak unless spoken to. The words didn't echo, they detonated. Silence fell so fast, it was deafening. The live jazz trio stopped mid-riff. A fork clattered to the floor from a nearby table. Somewhere in the back, the kitchen door creaked open and stayed that way. No one knew what to do. Do you pretend you didn't hear it? Do you look down at your menu like it didn't just happen? Or do you wait for anyone to say something? But no one moved. Because this wasn't just rude. It wasn't just arrogant. It was racial. Blatant. Ugly. And everyone heard it. Janelle stood there, frozen for a breath, a bottle of Pinot Noir in one hand, a folded napkin in the other. She had been called names before. She had dealt with microaggressions, passive-aggressive smiles, and backhanded compliments wrapped in corporate politeness. But this was a first. For a split second, she considered walking away. It would have been easier. Clock out, collect your last check, go home, cry it out, move on. But then she remembered Malik, her baby brother, the kid who looked up to her like she carried the whole sky. And she thought about all the times she'd told him, never let them decide your worth. So she did what no one expected. She turned to Caleb, calm, steady, unflinching, and said, "Sir, money doesn't buy dignity, and I wasn't raised to serve cowards." No yelling. No tears. No drama. Just truth, straight and sharp. It sliced through the tension like lightning through still air. You could feel the discomfort ripple across the room. A few guests dropped their gaze. One of the assistants at Caleb's table shifted in his chair, clearly unsure whether to intervene or vanish. And Caleb? He blinked once. Like he hadn't expected a response. Like no one had ever spoken to him that way before. Because they hadn't. In his world, people didn't talk back. They complied. They obeyed. But Janelle didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She just stood her ground, eyes locked on his, her body calm, her voice even. And in that moment, everything changed. Someone near the bar whispered, "Did she just say that?" Another guest pulled out their phone subtle, but not subtle enough. The maitre d', red-faced and sweating, rushed toward the table, mouth open to apologize, to explain, to do something, anything to make it all go away. But it was too late. The moment had already left the room and entered the internet. That first clip? 12 seconds. Uploaded by a hostess on break. Captioned simply, "She stood up." Within hours, it hit Reddit. Then Twitter. Then TikTok. Some people were outraged. She was disrespectful. She should have just walked away. That's not how you talk to a man like Caleb Foster. But others? They saw something different. They saw a woman who had been disrespected not just in that moment, but for years. They saw someone who said what so many had wanted to say but never dared to. They saw courage in a uniform society had taught them to overlook. The video hit 1 million views by midnight, 4 million by morning. And by the time Caleb's PR team tried to clean it up, it was already too late. Because the damage was done. Not to Janelle. But to him. She had done what no corporate merger, no investor rebellion, no expose had ever managed to do. She cracked his armor. Publicly. Permanently. But in that moment, Janelle didn't know any of that. She wasn't thinking about going viral. She wasn't thinking about headlines. She was thinking about dignity. About her mother, who always said, "Don't ever let them make you small." About the ancestors who survived worse and still stood tall. And so she did too. Still. Tall. Unapologetically. The insult had been loud. But her answer? It echoed louder. She didn't cry when they handed her the envelope. Didn't argue. Didn't beg. Janelle Carter just folded her apron, placed it gently on the hostess stand, and walked out the side door of the Marcellus for the last time. The termination letter was short. Unprofessional conduct. Violation of guest service standards. No mention of the insult. No mention of the cameras. No mention of Caleb Foster. Just 2 lines. And a lifetime of silence expected to follow. But silence wasn't what came next. By the time Janelle made it back to her apartment, her phone was buzzing nonstop. Voicemails, texts. A few from coworkers saying, "Be careful." A few more from strangers she didn't recognize. And then she saw it. The video. 12 seconds. Shot from a phone tilted slightly sideways. Grainy, but clear enough. Clear enough to hear Caleb's voice. Clear enough to see Janelle standing there, tall and calm. Clear enough to hear her response, word for word. She watched it once. Then again. Then she put her phone down. Because she knew what was coming. The internet didn't wait long. The hashtag started trending before sunrise. Number Stand with Janelle. Number Black Dignity. Number Foster Fallout. Some people called her brave. Others called her another angry black woman making a scene. The comments section was a battlefield. She should have kept quiet. She disrespected a paying customer. She deserved to be fired. She's a hero. It wasn't praise that caught her off guard. It was the hate. DMs telling her she should learn her place. Comments calling her a race baiter, entitled, and worse words she'd heard whispered in the past, now typed in all caps with no shame. They didn't know her. They didn't know her story. But they sure had opinions. Even some people in her own circle backed away. A friend from high school messaged, "This is too much drama for me." A cousin posted, "She could have handled it differently." And the management at the Marcellus? They went full damage control. They issued a statement saying they valued diversity and inclusion. that the incident was under internal review, that Janelle was no longer with the company, but that they were committed to learning from this. Janelle read that sentence 3 times. Committed to learning from what? The truth? The footage? Or the fallout? But the biggest blow didn't come from trolls or coworkers or corporations pretending to care. It came from a phone call. A recruiter she'd been emailing with for weeks about a hospitality coordinator job at a boutique hotel left a voicemail saying they were moving in another direction. Translation? They saw the video. And while some people called her brave, others saw her as a liability. Her rent was still due. Malik still needed a laptop. The viral fame hadn't paid a single bill. And yet even with the backlash, the stress, the weight of it all pressing on her chest like a brick, Janelle didn't regret what she said. Not for 1 second. Because for the first time in her life, the world had heard her. And no amount of online hate could unring that bell. But this part of the story isn't glamorous. This is the part most people skip over when they romanticize resistance. The backlash. The cold mornings when she woke up doubting herself. The awkward stares at the grocery store. The reporter who knocked on her door uninvited, mic in hand, asking, "Do you feel responsible for damaging Mr. Foster's reputation? Responsible? For defending her humanity?" She closed the door. But the question echoed. Because that's what the world does to black women who speak too boldly. It asks them to justify their tone, to apologize for their truth, to shrink quietly and be grateful for crumbs. But Janelle had already made her choice. She wouldn't go back. Not to silence. Not to invisibility. Not to playing small just to make powerful people feel comfortable. The backlash was real. But so was her voice. And she was just getting started. Janelle never expected help. She wasn't waiting for a handout. She didn't think a check would magically arrive in the mail, or that the internet's love would turn into rent money. She had learned a long time ago if anything was going to change, she'd have to move the needle herself. But help has a funny way of showing up, especially when you least expect it. It came in the form of a woman named Monica Ames, a name Janelle didn't recognize at first. A stranger with a clean email signature and a short message. "You don't know me, but I know exactly who you are. I was there that night. I didn't say anything and I should have. Let me fix that." At first, Janelle almost ignored it. She'd gotten dozens of messages since the video went viral, some supportive, some disturbing. This one seemed different. She Googled the name, and her jaw nearly dropped. Monica Ames. Senior Vice President of Talent Strategy at Foster Holdings, Caleb Foster's inner circle. A woman known for keeping her head down, getting deals done, and never speaking publicly about anything. Until now. The next day, Monica followed up short and simple again. "If you're open to talking, I'll come to you. No cameras, no press. Just coffee. My treat." Curiosity won. They met at a quiet cafe on the south side, the kind of spot where no one knew your name and nobody asked questions. Janelle wore jeans and a hoodie. Monica showed up in business casual but with no assistant, no laptop, no agenda. Just a look in her eyes, like someone carrying something heavy. "I was sitting 3 tables behind you," Monica said, as they sipped coffee. "I saw it all. Heard it all." She paused. "And I did nothing." Janelle didn't say anything. She didn't have to. "I've worked under Caleb Foster for 8 years, Monica continued. "I've seen things, heard things, I've ignored things, because I told myself I needed the job, the title, the security. I convinced myself it wasn't my place." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "But when I saw you stand there calm, composed, saying exactly what needed to be said, I realized, I've been complicit." It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears, no grand confessions. Just truth, plain and heavy. And then Monica said something Janelle never expected to hear. "I'm going to resign." Janelle blinked. "You don't have to do that." "I do," Monica said, firmly. "I should have spoken up that night, but I'll speak up now. I'm not letting his version of the story be the only one people hear." What followed was a ripple. Then a wave. Monica didn't just resign. She went public carefully, professionally, but clearly. In a statement posted on her LinkedIn, she wrote, "As someone who witnessed the incident firsthand, I believe Janelle Carter showed grace and integrity in the face of open disrespect. I can no longer be part of an organization that refuses to hold its leadership accountable for racial hostility, spoken or implied." The post went viral. Not as fast as Janelle's video, but it reached the right people. Other employees began to speak up. Former interns shared stories. Black and brown staffers who had quietly left Foster Holdings years ago started coming forward. The board took notice. The press circled back. Caleb Foster, once untouchable, was suddenly under scrutiny not just for what he said, but for the culture he created. And through it all, Monica never made herself the hero. She didn't do interviews. She didn't chase attention. She just used her voice, the quiet influence she'd spent years building, to open a door. And behind that door? Change. For the first time, Janelle wasn't alone in the fight. Her story wasn't a single flash of bravery. It became part of a bigger conversation, one that refused to go silent again. Because sometimes, the most powerful allies aren't the loudest. They're the ones who step forward quietly, when the noise fades, and the truth still needs to be told. It wasn't planned. No press conference. No viral moment. No dramatic build-up with a spotlight and a mic. Just a chance encounter. In a place neither of them expected. 2 months had passed since the dinner at the Marcellus. Caleb Foster had gone quiet, or at least quieter than usual. The backlash had hit hard. He lost 2 board seats. A major brand partnership dissolved overnight. Stock prices dipped. A Forbes cover story, once scheduled to crown him Tech Titan of the Year, was quietly pulled. He blamed cancel culture. Said nothing in public. Privately, he fired 3 PR firms in 4 weeks. He was used to controlling narratives. But this time, the story moved without him. Meanwhile, Janelle kept her head down. No interviews. No podcasts. Just life day by day. She got a part-time job at a bookstore. Malik got his new laptop, finally. Bills were still tight, but she could breathe. And that, in itself, felt like victory. Then came the day it happened. She was at a downtown co-working cafe not far from Midtown, meeting a small group of Black women entrepreneurs who had invited her to speak on resilience. It wasn't formal, just conversation over coffee. She was heading out, about to catch her lift home, when she saw him, Caleb, standing alone in the corner of the cafe. No entourage. No tailored suit. Just jeans, a baseball cap pulled low, and a takeout cup he hadn't touched. He was looking at her. For a moment, neither moved. And then, he approached. Janelle. His voice was quieter now. No arrogance. No authority. She turned, calm but alert. Caleb. He hesitated. Searching for words. Searching for power he no longer held. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said. "I didn't expect to be seen," she replied. A pause. He looked older. Tired. Not just from scandal, from exposure. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I was out of line." She looked him dead in the eye. "You were more than out of line. You were cruel." He nodded slowly. "You're right," he admitted. "I was. And I've lost a lot because of it." She raised an eyebrow. "You think this is about what you lost?" He said nothing. Janelle took a step closer. "You didn't just insult me. You insulted every Black woman who's ever had to hold her tongue just to keep her job. You said what too many people in power still think, but don't say out loud. And you did it like I was nothing." He looked down at his coffee. Still untouched. "I didn't see you," he said quietly. "I mean, I saw you, but I didn't see you." "That's the problem," she said. A long silence followed. People nearby were watching, sensing something but not knowing what. And then Caleb asked the question no one expected. "Is there anything I can do to make it right?" Janelle tilted her head slightly. "No," she said, "because this was never about you making it right. This is about you learning why you were wrong and not repeating it." He nodded again. There was no argument left in him. "And what if I've changed?" he asked. She gave a faint smile. "Then prove it. Not to me, to the people you silenced for years, to the women who sat in meetings you dominated, to the assistants who quit crying, to the interns who never came back. Don't prove it with words, prove it with how you move now." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing," she said over her shoulder. He looked up. "You're not the villain of this story because you were powerful. You're the villain because you thought no one else had power but you." And with that, she walked away. No mic drop. No applause. Just peace. A woman who had nothing to lose, and still gave someone else a chance to grow. The tables had turned, but she didn't flip them. She just stood tall, and let the truth sit where it belonged. The man who once built empires with a single email was now dodging cameras in parking garages. Caleb Foster wasn't used to being questioned, let alone cornered. He was a master of narrative. He knew how to control a room, spin a headline, redirect the spotlight. But that was before Janelle, before Monica, before the dam broke. And now? Now the spotlight was on him, and it wasn't flattering. The video of the confrontation had refused to fade. Instead, it kept resurfacing each time with more context, more reactions, more breakdowns. News anchors dissected his body language. Podcasters replayed his words in slow motion. Think pieces flooded the internet, asking, how many powerful men like Caleb Foster are still hiding in plain sight? At first, Caleb's team tried the usual tactics. Blame the media. Play the victim. Spin it as a misunderstanding. But that strategy crumbled fast. Why? Because people started talking. Not just online, inside his own company. An anonymous email leak from a former executive assistant described months of verbal abuse and racial microaggressions. A former HR director came forward on record, saying complaints about Caleb were routinely buried or dismissed. Even old interview clips resurfaced, ones where he made snide jokes about diversity hires and woke culture. For years, people had laughed along. Now, they weren't laughing. They were angry. And more importantly, they were loud. A coalition of Black professionals launched a petition calling for accountability inside Foster Holdings. Major brands began reconsidering their partnerships. One by one, deals fell through. Then came the shareholder meeting. It was supposed to be private, held over Zoom, tightly managed, behind closed digital doors. But someone recorded it. And leaked it. In the video, Caleb appeared agitated, frustrated, even desperate. He called the backlash a distraction. Said he was being targeted for political reasons. Dismissed the idea of stepping down as ridiculous. But the moment that went viral again was when a young Black shareholder, just 27, asked him directly, "Do you believe a woman like Janelle Carter deserves the same respect as you?" Caleb paused. Too long. And then said, "I don't know her. I don't think this company should make business decisions based on internet outrage." That was it. That pause? That answer? It told the world everything. Within 48 hours, the board issued a public statement. They thanked Mr. Foster for his years of service and announced his immediate resignation. Just like that, the man who once held the world in his palm was out. No golden farewell. No legacy montage. Just a press release and a brief market rally. And Caleb? He disappeared. No public apology. No Instagram Notes app statement. Just silence. Some say he left the country for a while. Others claim he's trying to rebrand, working on a book or a podcast. But none of that matters now. Because the mask cracked, and people saw what was underneath. Not a titan. Not a genius. Just a man who thought power gave him the right to treat people like they didn't matter. And in the end, that belief cost him everything. But here's the part most people missed. It wasn't just the internet that brought him down. It wasn't one viral video, or one brave woman, or one fired executive. It was all of it. All the voices that had been ignored. All the glances that turned into statements. All the hands that hit record when it mattered. It was the people who refused to stay silent even when it was hard. even when it was dangerous, even when it meant losing something. Caleb Foster didn't just crack. He collapsed under the weight of everything he built on fear. And now, the empire he ruled with silence had been taken down by a voice. A calm one. A strong one. A voice that said, "I wasn't raised to serve cowards." And the world finally listened. Janelle never asked to be a symbol. She didn't plan it, didn't post the video, didn't rehearse a viral quote in front of her bathroom mirror. She just told the truth. And somehow, that truth shifted the ground beneath her feet. After Caleb Foster stepped down, the media frenzy didn't die. If anything, it intensified. Everyone wanted Janelle. Television networks called. Magazine editors emailed. PR agents offered to package her story into something glossy, something safe. But she turned most of them down. Not because she wasn't grateful, but because she understood something most people didn't. This wasn't about her becoming famous. It was about her voice finally being heard. And she wasn't going to sell it to the highest bidder. Instead, she did something that surprised even herself. She started speaking on her own terms. It began with a podcast interview hosted by a black woman she admired. No flashy graphics, no hype. Just two women talking, honestly, about power, race, and what happens when you finally stop shrinking. The episode went viral. Then came invitations to college campuses, women's groups, black leadership conferences. She spoke softly. She didn't preach. She didn't frame herself as a hero. She told stories. Her stories. Stories about being unseen. About carrying dignity in spaces designed to strip it away. About her mom, her brother, her dreams, and the night everything changed. And people listened. Not because she yelled, but because she didn't. Janelle's voice was measured, but firm. Warm, but unshakable. The kind of voice that made you sit up straighter. Made you feel something you'd been pushing down. She wasn't trying to go viral again. She was trying to build something that lasted. So she started doing exactly that. With help from a nonprofit initiative and a few generous donors moved by her story, Janelle opened a small community cafe on the west side of Atlanta. She called it Seen. Not because she wanted to be the center of attention, but because she knew what it felt like to be invisible. The cafe wasn't fancy. Wood tables, brick walls, a chalkboard menu with handwritten specials. But it was filled with sunlight, with books by black authors lining the shelves, with student art on the walls, with free Wi-Fi and the smell of cinnamon and roasted beans in the air. It became a place where young black professionals came to co-work, where high school girls read poetry out loud without fear, where Malik helped tutor kids who couldn't afford after-school programs. Every Saturday, Janelle hosted a roundtable, not a panel, not a seminar. Just people gathering to talk about being heard, about workplace bias, about courage, about reclaiming the space they were always told wasn't theirs. She never advertised it, but the room was always full. And still, Janelle stayed grounded. She walked to work, still paid off bills in small chunks, still grocery shopped on a budget. But something had shifted, because now, when she walked into a room, people made space. Not because she demanded it, but because she deserved it. And she knew it. That was the real rise. Not the fame, not the followers, but the moment she no longer questioned her place. She had found her voice, and in doing so, gave others permission to find theirs. Caleb Foster faded into headlines. A cautionary tale, a chapter closed. But Janelle? She kept rising. Not fast, not loud, but steady, unshaken, seen. Redemption is a funny thing. Some chase it like a finish line. Others pretend they never needed it. And then, there are the few who stand at the edge of it, wondering if they're even worthy of it. Caleb Foster stood at that edge. Months had passed since his empire cracked. He hadn't given a public statement. No interviews, no TED Talks, no Come to Jesus op-eds in the New York Times. Just silence. Some assumed he was gone for good off in some Mediterranean villa, waiting for the internet to forget. But he wasn't gone. He was watching. And learning painfully, awkwardly, quietly. Because after everything fell apart, something unexpected happened. He started listening. For the first time in his adult life, Caleb Foster wasn't surrounded by people who told him what he wanted to hear. The investors were gone. The assistants were replaced. The fear he once used to control a room had turned into something else. Loneliness. And that loneliness? It cracked him open. He started reading. Not business books. Not branding guides. Books about race. About history. About harm. He sat through workshops anonymously, with the camera off, led by people who didn't care who he used to be. He hired a therapist. Not a high-performance coach. Not a PR consultant. A black woman. Someone who looked him in the eye through Zoom and said, "This isn't about saving your career. This is about figuring out why you thought your behavior didn't need to be questioned in the first place." And slowly, Caleb began to face himself. Not the CEO. Not the brand. The man. The boy who grew up believing power meant control. That success excused cruelty. That dominance was leadership. He started writing not for publication, just for himself. He wrote about his father's harshness. About the first time he was told, "Never let them see you weak." About the pride he felt when people feared him. And the shame he felt when no one stood up for him after the fallout. He realized something brutal. He had built a life so high, he couldn't see the damage he left behind. And now, he was finally looking down. But redemption isn't earned in silence. It's forged in action. So Caleb made a choice. He reached out. Not to Janelle. Not directly. But to the board at Foster Holdings. He asked to return not as CEO, but as an unpaid consultant on equity and culture repair. The board refused. Too risky. Too raw. But he persisted. Eventually, a small community business initiative in Baltimore, one run by women of color, agreed to let him volunteer. Not to lead. Not to speak. To serve. Caleb swept floors. Sorted donation boxes. Took meeting notes. He said little. He listened much. And slowly, the people around him began to soften, not because he asked for forgiveness, but because he didn't. He just showed up. Consistently. Quietly. Word got out. Some praised him. Others rolled their eyes. "Redemption tour," they muttered. But he didn't respond. Because Caleb wasn't trying to fix his image anymore. He was trying to fix himself. But here's the truth. Not everyone gets a comeback. Not every story ends in applause. Sometimes redemption isn't about getting back what you lost. It's about becoming someone who deserved it in the first place. So, was Caleb redeemed? Or was he ruined? The answer depends on who you ask. To the media, he was a fallen mogul. To some critics, he was just playing the long game. But to the young intern at the community center who once overheard Caleb apologize for interrupting her sincerely, with no cameras around, maybe, just maybe, he was on his way to becoming someone new. Not for headlines, not for legacy, but for himself. Because the real test of character isn't how you rise. It's what you do after you fall. It happened on a Wednesday. A quiet one. No protests. No viral videos. No boardroom battles. Just another day in the city, ordinary on the outside, but about to serve one of life's strangest flavors. Irony. Janelle was at Scene, her cafe, organizing a book drive for local kids. It was something she did every fall: gather gently used books, pair each one with a handwritten note, and deliver them to underserved schools in the district. Simple. Small. Powerful. That morning, she was restocking the community bookshelf when the door opened. She didn't look up right away, too focused on aligning the titles just right. But then she heard the voice. Not loud. Not arrogant. Just familiar. "Excuse me, are donations still open?" She turned. And there he was. Caleb Foster. Holding a box of books in his arms. No cameras. No security. No designer suit. Just jeans, a hoodie, and eyes that carried the weight of 1,000 conversations he'd never had. They hadn't seen each other since the cafe encounter months ago. Janelle stood up slowly, unsure whether to smile, speak, or send someone else to handle it. But something in her stayed still. She walked over. "Yes," she said, "donations are open." He gently placed the box on the counter. Old hardcovers, business titles, some children's books, a few classics, Invisible Man. Their eyes were watching God, the bluest eye. She raised an eyebrow. He noticed. "I've been reading," he said softly. "Trying." She nodded, not saying much. And that silence? It wasn't awkward. It was honest. Then, as if the universe couldn't help itself, one of Janelle's regulars walked in. A community organizer. Bright smile, loud energy. She beamed the moment she saw Caleb. "Oh my God," she said. "You look just like that guy who—" Janelle cut in casually. "He gets that a lot." The woman laughed and moved toward the counter, and Caleb looked at Janelle with a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. She didn't owe him protection, but she offered him a moment of dignity anyway. Irony, right? The same woman he once dismissed, now choosing to shield him from shame. Not because he deserved it, but because she had grown beyond needing to prove anything. They stood quietly as the cafe buzzed around them. And then Caleb asked, "Can I buy you a coffee? Just talk?" Janelle thought for a moment, then shook her head. "Number?" He looked surprised but not offended. "Not now," she said. "But maybe one day." He nodded. Fair. It wasn't rejection. It was timing. And as he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "I still hear your voice," he said. "Not just that night, after, in my head. Sometimes when I'm about to say something out of habit, I stop. Because I hear you." Janelle didn't smile, didn't soften. She just said, "Good." Because that's what change sounds like. Not applause, not grand gestures. Just a whisper that makes someone pause, right before they say the wrong thing. That's irony. The same voice he once tried to silence, now guiding him through his own transformation. And here's where it twists even more. A few weeks later, an article appeared in a quiet little leadership blog, one barely anyone read. It was written anonymously, under a pen name. But Janelle recognized the cadence. It was Caleb's writing. The article was titled, "The Day I Was Educated by Someone I Tried to Belittle." He didn't name her, didn't describe the cafe, but he described the feeling, the shift, the slow, painful unlearning. And it didn't go viral. It didn't trend. But it didn't need to. Because irony doesn't always come with headlines. Sometimes it shows up in the subtle arc of a story. A billionaire brought to humility. A waitress who rose with grace. And a moment in a quiet coffee shop, where the past stood face to face with growth, and chose not to repeat itself. Now that's a twist worth remembering. Power used to mean volume. Who talked the loudest? Who interrupted the most? Who sat at the head of the table and decided who even got a seat? That was the world Janelle Carter stepped into, or, rather, was forced to survive in. Back then, her authority was measured by silence. How well she followed orders. How little space she took up. How invisible she could be without making anyone uncomfortable. But that was before the night everything changed. Before the moment her voice shook a room full of men who were never used to being challenged. Before the ripple turned into a wave. And now? Power looked different. It looked like Janelle opening the cafe every morning, keys jingling, apron tied, sunlight pouring through the glass. It looked like the way people listened when she spoke, not because they were afraid, but because they respected her. It looked like the mentor emails she now received weekly from young black women across the country. Some in corporate roles, some in school, all of them asking, "How do I do what you did without losing myself?" She never gave them a blueprint, because the truth was she didn't have one. What she had was clarity. Janelle had come to understand something no leadership book could teach. True authority doesn't shout. It doesn't belittle. It doesn't exploit. True authority listens. It makes space. It uplifts. It leads from the center, not the top. It shows up, even when no one's watching. That was the lesson Caleb Foster never understood, not until it was too late. And even now, as he tried to rebuild something quietly, slowly, from the ground up, Janelle wasn't focused on him anymore. Because this story was no longer about taking power back from someone else. It was about redefining it entirely. Every time she stood in front of a classroom to speak, every time she handed a check to a local youth program, every time she gave someone their first job behind the cafe counter and told them, "I see you," she wasn't just exercising authority, she was reframing it. Because here's what she knew now. Power isn't ownership. It's stewardship. You don't hoard it. You pass it on. You don't weaponize it. You protect with it. That's what made Janelle dangerous, not to society, but to the systems that had long benefited from her silence. She didn't rise to burn bridges. She rose to build new ones, stronger ones for people like her. And the irony? She didn't even want power. Not in the traditional sense. Not the spotlight. Not the credit. She just wanted the freedom to stand, speak, and live, without fear. But the world took notice anyway. Local news called her a community leader. A grassroots organization awarded her for cultural impact. A senator once stopped by her cafe unannounced, not for publicity, but to listen. Still, Janelle never let it change her. She still made the coffee herself. Still swept the floors when the barista called out. Still walked home some nights, hoodie up, hands in pockets, playlist on shuffle. Because the power wasn't in what people called her. It was in what she had become. Whole, grounded, unshaken. Authority, Janelle realized, isn't a title or a spotlight. It's a presence. And her presence? It was unignorable now. Not because it was loud, but because it was earned. Earned in the moments she refused to bend. Earned in the nights she cried but still showed up the next morning. Earned when she told the truth, and let the world decide what to do with it. That's what power looks like when it's rooted in truth, not ego. And once you've held that kind of power, you'll never be fooled by the counterfeit version again. It's easy to overlook the quiet ones. They don't fight for the spotlight. They don't raise their voices to dominate conversations. They're the ones who nod instead of interrupt, who observe when others perform, who listen deeply while the world talks over itself. But never mistake quiet for weakness. Because when the quiet ones speak, it means something. Janelle Carter wasn't loud. She wasn't raised to be. She was raised to be polite, professional, grateful for the opportunity. She learned early how to keep her head down, to move through spaces where her presence was tolerated but never celebrated. She learned that speaking up could mean losing your job, your safety, your peace. But she also learned something deeper. That silence over time costs more than words ever could. So when Janelle finally did speak that night at the restaurant, in front of Caleb Foster and a room full of people who didn't expect her to push back, she wasn't just defending herself. She was defending every woman who had ever bitten her tongue, every person of color who'd smiled through the insult, every nobody who'd been told their dignity was less important than someone else's power. And the irony? The man who tried to put her in her place ended up losing his. Not because she screamed, not because she dragged him through the mud, but because she stood her ground. Calm, firm, undeniable. That's the real lesson. True strength isn't about volume. It's about alignment. It's about knowing who you are so deeply that no one, not even a billionaire CEO, can make you question your worth. And it's a reminder for the rest of us too. Because let's be honest, we've all underestimated someone like Janelle before. Maybe it was the intern we never invited to speak. Maybe it was the barista we didn't thank. Maybe it was the woman in the back of the meeting who had the best ideas, but didn't fit the image of power. We need to do better. We need to redefine what authority looks like, what leadership sounds like, what strength feels like. Because when we stop equating power with aggression, when we start honoring presence over performance, we make space for people like Janelle and thousands of others to lead in their own way. And that changes everything. Janelle didn't become a hero by going viral. She became a hero because she refused to be small. She refused to shrink, even when it would have been safer to disappear. She rose without asking for permission. And when people tried to silence her, she spoke anyway. And the world listened. So if you're watching this, if you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, pushed aside, hear this. You are not small. You are not replaceable. You are not someone else's stepping stone. Your voice matters. Even if it shakes. Even if it's soft. Even if they don't clap when you're done. Use it anyway. Because someone, somewhere, needs to hear what only you can say. And if you're one of the quiet ones, good. You don't have to shout to be powerful. You don't have to fight dirty to win. You don't have to become like them to change the game. You just have to stay grounded. Stay clear. Stay ready. Because one day, they'll try to write over your story, and you'll be the one holding the pen. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, or opened your eyes to someone you've overlooked, share this video with them. Leave a comment and tell us, when was the moment you found your voice? And if you haven't yet, don't worry. Your moment's coming. Just remember, never underestimate the quiet ones. Because when they speak, they don't just change the room, they change the world.